Bitcoin is the black hole, the apex predator of all monetary assets. It is the superior form of money. I don't want anything to do with dollars. I'd rather have Bitcoin. I'm searching for something that never debases my energy, which would be an absolutely scarce system. Bitcoin is the first absolutely finite asset in the world. That means my value can't be debased. Everything is good for Bitcoin. Everything is bad for fiat. Look at the world through a fiat lens and it seems like it's just broken. As long as I align myself with Bitcoin, life gets more affordable over time. We receive the productivity gains, the lowering of prices, the increase of purchasing power that comes with the deflationary system that is Bitcoin. There actually is hope because my life does get better over time. Once we start to do that globally, that's the world I'm here for.
All right, Cole Walmsley, thanks for being on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm a fan of yours. I follow you on X. You got the great Beyond Infinity newsletter. I know you're writing a book called The Bitcoin Thesis, which we'll get into a little bit later. And you got the Cole Walmsley Experience podcast and YouTube show, what you're doing, all putting out great stuff going into like the deep spiritual, philosophical side of sound money and Bitcoin, which I love. So I'm excited for this conversation. And I got to start with the first question, which is, what's your favorite thing about Bitcoin?
Yeah, I saw this question when you first asked me over Twitter, whenever it was. The first thing that came to mind was that it's truthful. And I think you can make the assertion that Bitcoin is the only entirely verifiably and immutably truthful set of information in the world. And the significance of that, particularly as the base layer of the new world that we're heading into, is monumental and plays into the significance of Bitcoin for sure, especially when juxtaposed against fiat and the current base layer of deceit and corruption and lying and dishonesty. So I would say that's what I enjoy most about it. That's what I find most significant about it.
Yeah, I dig that. So can you go a little deeper into it? Like, what do you mean by it's the only truthful and immutable set of information in the world?
Yeah.
Can you describe that a little more?
Well, the whole protocol is foundationally based on verifiable proof of work. So Bitcoin cannot function unless work has been done, has been performed by the network and then verified as accurate and truthful by the rest of the network, the nodes and whatnot. So that means everything that's plugged into the Bitcoin protocol, all of the transactions and the information that's communicated, the work that's done, is verified according to the rules of Bitcoin as being honest, fair, and truthful. And so the whole thing runs on that base layer of truth. And so us as humans can look to that protocol and even ground ourselves into that protocol and align ourselves with truth because Bitcoin is aligned with truth in that manner. And the significance of that is unfolding. The further and further we go into it, the more and more we're aligning with verifiable proof of work. I think something that I've alluded to in the past is that one of my favorite things about Bitcoin is that it exposes scammers ruthlessly, because if the whole thing runs on verifiable proof of work, which I assert is akin to honest and valid productivity, then you have to present honest and valid productivity within the market, especially within the Bitcoin world, for you to actually receive value and to make money. And it's the same thing within Bitcoin. You have to present honest and valid productivity in the form of verifiable proof of work to secure and earn the Bitcoin rewards from a block and the fees. So moving into that system, again, from this current system of deceit across the board and lying and the corruption that's required to insert a monetary system that steals and debases the value of everyone within it is quite radical, but it's going to be quite significant in its benefits for all of us, which I greatly look forward to.
Radical is a good word for it. Mm-hmm. I kind of constantly feel this weird juxtaposition where we sit in this space and time where it's pretty new and most people, don't really get it, right? Like, and if you spend time online or you look on X or Reddit or YouTube or TikTok or wherever, if you post content, you get comments or whatever, and there's so many people who are just immediate snap judgment is like, that's a scam, that's a Ponzi scheme, that's dumb, and then to hear like what you just said about it, right? Like sitting in the awkward, uncomfortable weirdness of some large percentage of people just believe it's a total joke and a total scam. And then some people who've like done a lot of study and really understand it are like, no, this is a radical, complete shift in monetary system and everything that is affected by the monetary system, which is everything downstream in society. Like, how
Yeah.
do you think about that? Do you like, how do you wrap your mind around that?
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is the exact quote, but this is what I start off my book, The Bitcoin Thesis, with. It's the very first quote in the very first chapter. It's that which is nothing can be loved or hated unless it is first understood. And a lot of the people, I would say the vast majority of the population today, don't have an understanding of even money in general, much less Bitcoin. And even at the end of that first chapter, I started that in order to understand Bitcoin, you must understand money. And so people are presented with this extremely abstract concept and idea and kind of life form that is Bitcoin. And because it's so deep, and the journey of understanding is so time filling, it requires so much time and dedication of energy to understand money and then Bitcoin and everything downstream of that. People would rather just throw up a wall and say that it opposes their current viewpoints, and then you get the portion of the population as well that is grounded in the current system and has created an identity structure and an idea structure around that system. And so when they see something that threatens it, they view it as a threat. And so instead of going into it and then potentially being forced to say that essentially they were wrong in their past beliefs, they'd rather just resist it and say it's crazy, it's not going to work, it's a pump and dump, it's a get rich quick scheme, Ponzi scheme, throw all the labels out instead of actually doing the work. But again, we're moving into where everything is proof of work. And I would assert that's honestly, well, in the fiat system, it really isn't, but we're moving into that system. And so if somebody wants to understand Bitcoin and maximally reap the benefits from it, it takes a certain level of proof of work to understand it and to have a grasp of it, and take it from the abstract into the more real and grounded, and kind of remove some of the illusions that are based in fiat and the way of thinking there.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. How to like the proof of work you have to put in to understand Bitcoin mirrors the proof of work underlying the protocol itself. It's an
Yeah.
interesting analogy there. Is there do you think of, is there like a moment or a time when it clicked for you? There's something that made it click?
Yeah, I started studying Bitcoin in March of 2022. I had made a bad investment in crypto. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a complete beginner. I'd started investing about a year and a half prior. At the end of, in the fall of 2020, when they injected a bunch of money, and I had made a good chunk of change, but that was pure beginner's luck because it was the ultimate time to be someone speculating in the market because everything was up and to the right as a result of the monetary injection. So I had gone through stocks, went into crypto, was just listening to a whole bunch of other people, made a bad investment in Olympus DAO, that's an actual Ponzi scheme. That's a talk about Ponzi schemes. But I made that bad investment and ended up selling everything at the start of 2022 because I was fed up with seeing it lose money and go down in price, and I was wanting to press reset and go back to ground zero and build my way up from there based on something that I actually understood, research for myself. So I started researching everything across the board, all asset classes, real estate, art, stocks, gold, metals, everything, crypto. I found Bitcoin in the halving cycle. I started asking questions about the pattern there every 4 years. And it was maybe a period about 8 months or so of, at one point, it took me to admit that I was incredibly stupid around the subject. I was lacking in knowledge and understanding. And once I kind of admitted that, I wrote a whole Google document of probably 85 plus questions around Bitcoin that I had no answers to, but I wanted to discover the answers to. And it took, about 8 months of self-discovery and self-exploration in and through Bitcoin for then me to buy the Bitcoin Standard. And then once I bought the Bitcoin Standard, I didn't even need to read the Bitcoin part of that book for me to get it and for me to have the holy bejesus, this is insane, this is changing the world. It was one of the only books I would say that I've read that I had pieces of paper out next to me taking notes as I was reading it. And I started connecting all these dots, and it really clicked because I had the foundational understanding of what is money and how Bitcoin plugged into that. And I could plug it into it based off my prior 8 months or so of research without even needing to get to the Bitcoin part for me to understand that Bitcoin is the hardest money in the world and the significance of that.
You've had to pass the ego test, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
It's like, I think we're fond of saying Bitcoin is an IQ test and an ego test. I mean, I kind of say that, and then essentially like the list of questions thing. I mean, I didn't mirror that. Like, I didn't write down a list of questions the same way, but my experience was always typically people throwing out FUD, right? Someone will always comment, well, quantum computing, or, well, money can't work on a fixed standard, or whatever they'll throw out. My thing was always like, I want to know if that's true. Like, what's the answer to that? What's the rebuttal? What's the both sides? And I would like deep dive each of these questions to try to see if I could understand the answer, and then try to articulate it back. Sometimes that last part is harder than you think. But one of my favorite things that you've written, I think you called it the most logical Bitcoin argument, because it was the thing about measurements. And I've tried to use this analogy in the past before, where I'll sometimes go like, the thing I came up with was like, trying to measure a mile, but every day the ruler changes.
Yeah.
Like, so of course, like, people are like, well, miles are so volatile. You're like, no, dude. Like, and so your piece, I think you use the measurement analogy too, but you also use the analogy of time.
Yeah.
Time as we use measurements of time. And then I don't know if you could explain sort of the argument that you made there about why
Sure.
Bitcoin is so logical and why a fixed measurement of money makes sense.
Yeah, so we all operate on a standard measurement of time globally across the world. And because of that, we're able to cooperate and coordinate with each other in a productive manner. And that's not confusing. If we had, one day was 26 hours in the United States and one day was 22 hours in Australia, and we had a minute was 85 seconds here and 45 seconds there, all of the communication surrounding time would be incredibly confusing and incredibly complex mathematical dance. That's not fun and not productive. So we have a singular, standardized global system of measurement around time, and that maximally allows us to be productive and coordinate with each other. I relate that to, one, the current system of money, which is a measurement of value, and then taking it further to Bitcoin. Currently, we have about 190-ish, give or take, fiat currencies across the world. All of those currencies are a measurement of value, but they're all different in their measurement. And so it's like we have 190 different systems of time all around the world, and we're trying to coordinate and cooperate with each other globally, and we wonder why there's so much tension and chaos and conflict and just a lack of coordination and unity across the board. By moving the measurement of value to a singular, standardized, global measurement that is Bitcoin, all of us are on the same page in terms of what the measurement of value looks like, what the monetary system is, such that I can be in the United States and something like a cow costs 1 Bitcoin, in Australia it costs half a Bitcoin. And so I can know the actual difference without me having to calculate, okay, it's worth $1,000 in the United States and it's worth 14,000 pesos in Mexico. Well, how much is $1 worth to a peso? And it just becomes unnecessary. So it's logical that an intelligent species would move to what is most efficient and what is most optimal and most productive, which is a singular standardized system of values such that we can coordinate most efficiently. And so instead of having the current system of 190 currencies, we can move to one system, one standardized measurement of value, that's Bitcoin, and thus that's most optimal and most efficient. And so again, logically, it seems that an intelligent form of species, although sometimes maybe not so much, would move towards that system because it's most optimal and most efficient.
Yeah, and in a digital world where borders are ever, like physical borders, lines on a map, are like matter less and less, especially economically, right? In a lot of ways, it only makes sense
Exactly.
that like, why do we have 190 different weird? Well, and the biggest piece about it being each of those 190 different things, the measurement, the ruler itself is changing. So each of them
Exactly.
is
Yes.
changing how much it measures what actual value is in terms of its purchasing power.
Key point.
Therefore, the chaos of trying to compare value amongst those currencies, which are themselves supposed to be fixed measures, but they're not.
That's a very key point in that there's 190 different measurements, but each of those measurements is fluctuating. So it's not fixed, and you're constantly having to recalculate all of these calculations and measurements with as they relate to each other, exchange rates, and it's so nauseating and backwards to what a maximally intelligent species would be doing.
Yeah, and so you have this. I'm going to transition this to a thing you wrote, but you have this thing called the dollar milkshake. There's the dollar milkshake theory, which is a guy Brent Johnson, right? But I'm sure I'm making it very, very simplistic. But the idea is more global liquidity will just get sucked up by the dollar because all these other currencies suck more. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification, but like more and more of that will come into the dollar, and probably more and more of these other crappier fiat currencies will collapse. And then the other day, you wrote, forget about the dollar milkshake theory. It's the Bitcoin milkshake theory. So
Yeah.
can you give a little overview of that?
Yeah, I think Brent he's not necessarily wrong, and his theory even ends in that the dollar will eventually collapse too. But then it's like, well, what happens next? Where do we go from there?
Yeah.
And so I assert that the ultimate straw in the milkshake sucking up all of the liquidity in the world is Bitcoin, because it's the hardest, most superior asset in the world. And so as the global currencies around the dollar, weaken, and everyone seeks out US denominated assets, including the dollar, Bitcoin is superior to the dollar because that's continuing to inflate away and debase in value. And so me as an economic user, and everybody else within the market is going to continue to realize that I don't want dollars, and especially as it weakens and they print more, and I don't want anything to do with dollars. I'd rather have Bitcoin. And so as the whole fiat system unwinds, even in Brent's theory, the eventual replacement for the dollar and the straw that's sucking up all the liquidity is Bitcoin. So every ounce of liquidity in the milkshake is moving towards Bitcoin because it is the ultimate black hole for all monetary liquidity, because it is the superior form of money. And that's really the basic theory. It's kind of just put it in a different way. And I had seen the dollar milkshake a few years ago before I fully understood Bitcoin, and it was like kind of hard to put my finger on. It was like, okay, and then what? And recently I just had the idea, I had it saved in my Twitter drafts for a while, of the Bitcoin milkshake theory, and then eventually I sat down and I wrote the thread and published it out there. And that's the basic idea, is that Bitcoin is the black hole. It's the apex predator of all monetary assets.
And that also, I think, maybe leans into why you call your newsletter, why you talk about infinity, and why you call it Beyond Infinity. So why'd you call it Beyond Infinity? And I'm guessing that relates to the idea that Bitcoin. You've written a long form post about this too, where Bitcoin isn't just worth what the 1 quadrillion dollars worth of dollar denominated assets are currently today. Bitcoin is actually worth infinity.
Yeah. Yeah, it all ties in together, because ultimately I think and I have this on my newsletter, to be conscious is to be wrangling with infinity, because that's what we're within right now. The idea behind the name of the newsletter is to go beyond infinity, in essence, to go into it and see it for what it is. And it's more of a cheeky name than a literal one, more of a figurative one, but I like to go into the rabbit holes that reveal what's real. That's kind of the tagline of the newsletter. That's the idea of it. And when you go into Bitcoin and you realize that its actual value is infinity, and its alignment with the laws of mathematics, in that all of the value in the world that's able to be created economically, across all forms of intelligence is infinite. We don't really know the limit to how much value can be created. So we would need a fixed and finite monetary denominator, a number of supply, to accurately denominate infinity. Because if you denominate infinity by infinity, which is what fiat supply is, it's an undefined output. It breaks the laws of mathematics. If it's zero, same thing. So you need something that's actually fixed and finite in supply, which is Bitcoin. And then if you have that singular monetary system that's measuring all global value, well, if all global value is infinity and you're denominating it by Bitcoin, which is measuring everything, well, then all of Bitcoin would be worth infinity. And so that's how you arrive at the true value of Bitcoin in my eyes, and others as well.
I mean, I think that people who don't know anything about Bitcoin or don't understand that just think we're crazy when we say that, right? Like, it makes no sense to them, right? Like, they just think you just want to go up in dollar value so you can sell it to the next guy and make more dollars. And they think, well, what's the end game for your Bitcoin? Because it's not just going to keep going up forever. Like, at some point, it's a Ponzi and it's going to collapse. So I know you just said it, but like, can you try to explain a little bit more about like why all the value in the world is infinity, and why Bitcoin, if you denominate that in Bitcoin terms, then that goes to infinity? I mean, I feel like it's just hard for people to grasp like what that means, and why Bitcoin isn't just an asset that I'm hoping goes up so I can sell it to the next guy. I'm actually waiting because I think that it can suck up all the value of all the other assets and become that monetary standard that then we denominate things in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think you can kind of take it through a series of questions. I think the first one is true or false. There's no limit to how much value can be created, and so someone can have whatever answer they want to that. I think it's true. And if there is a limit, what is the limit? Like 16,000 units of value? Like, no, it's actually infinite. We don't know how far technology can take us, how well we can advance it. The new forms of technology that will develop that will lead to other technologies. I mean, you can even go back 25 years ago and there's technologies around today that people would be confused about. And the further back you go in time, the more unbelievable it gets. And being that technology is exponentially advancing, thing, then the value created is also exponentially accelerating. And so then it becomes, well, does Bitcoin actually, because money's job is to denominate the value in the economy, does money actually converge on Bitcoin? Does money actually converge on a singular system? And you can get further into that. I would say, well, first, why would money converge onto Bitcoin? We've already answered why, the singular system part. It's most efficient and most optimal. Well, Bitcoin is the first absolutely finite or absolutely scarce asset in the world. And that's significant because that means my value can't be debased if I hold the energy or a certain amount of energy within that system. And so if you relate it to, well, I have 10 houses in a 100 house economy, we'll say. I have 10% of the energy within that system. If 100 more houses are created, there's now 200 houses that I still own my 10. I haven't bought or sold any. I still have my energy as I think, but in actuality, I now only have 5% of the energy in that system. So my energy and its worth has been debased because of inflation and supply. So if I own a certain amount of Bitcoin, let's call it, 1 million Bitcoins, that's roughly, a little bit over 5% of the supply within Bitcoin. The Bitcoin rules and the Bitcoin protocol that's secured by the entire network every 10 minutes states that the supply of Bitcoin will never surpass 21 million, which means my energy can never be debased and devalued so long as I'm storing it in that system. So for me, as somebody that earns value, which is akin to time and energy, I want to store it as best as I can. So I'm searching for something that never debases my energy, which would be an absolutely scarce system. Being that Bitcoin is absolutely scarce, that would be the best place to put it. But that's not where the value case ends, because Bitcoin is the first absolutely scarce system. It had the first mover advantage to where, okay, if there's, let's call it Bitcoin is secure with a number to simplify it. It's secure to 100 units. That's how secure it is. And there's a new absolutely scarce system that comes onto the market in 2012, 3 years after Bitcoin does. That system has the same 21 million supply, but it only has one unit of security. Well, why would I, as an economic user, place my value, my energy, and my time in the less secure, absolutely scarce system if I want to best secure my value, my time, and my energy? The answer is I wouldn't. And that's exactly why there has never been another monetary system, specifically an absolutely scarce one, that's surpassed Bitcoin, because it's the first mover, because it got out in front as the most decentralized and most secure. And there's a network effect that stems from that, where somebody has value, time, and energy to assign to a system, and they want to choose the most secure, absolutely scarce system, which always has been Bitcoin and always is. And so they choose that more than the other ones. And you've seen the result of people that have decided to store their monetary energy elsewhere across the course of crypto, and even wider across all monetary assets since 2009. They have suffered in terms of the value of their time and energy by placing it somewhere else other than Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is the most secure, absolutely scarce monetary system that has the ability to transcend borders and time and space in our 3D world, such that we can instantly communicate value with each other anywhere in the world. And it's the most secure and decentralized, such that it can't be corrupted and the rules can't be changed and altered. So logically, again, the world is going to converge upon that. And then if a singular system is best, well, then you have a singular system, which is Bitcoin, as the most secure, absolutely scarce system in the world that's denominating all of the value. And as our first question stated, I believe it's true that there's no limit to how much value there is. And so if there's no limit, then it's best described as infinite. So then you have a fixed, finite 21 million supply cap of Bitcoins denominated infinity, and you plug infinity divided by 21 million into any calculator and it'll give you infinity. And so that's how you get to Bitcoin equals infinity.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds like a no-brainer to me.
It really is. It really is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this was a while ago, I think, but it was like you were in the replies of a guy who was like, you have these, and this actually flared up recently too on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this one between like Lynn Alden and this other guy, but people who say, well, money can't work on it if it's fixed. If the supply of money is totally fixed, it can't work. There aren't enough units to go around, or that doesn't incentivize productivity enough or investment enough. It just incentivizes hoarding, which is just a derogatory term for saving. But you've responded to that, I know, in the past. But like, how do you take? What's your take on people who say, "Oh, well, you can't. It doesn't work if the money supply is fixed"?
Yeah, if I was to be blunt, I would say it's stupid, because they're alluding to the fact essentially that nobody would spend money and the economy would collapse. And I would assert that the economy would actually collapse to true demand levels and true supply levels, to where right now we have so much artificial demand and fluff that gets funded and monetized and capitalized in the economy because there's an infinite amount of money available to fund nonsense. And so we have bloated asset prices, runaway inflation, nonsense being propagated by venture capitalists and other financiers, and just an infinite amount of money available. So there's all this bloat and bubbled up nonsense. If there's a fixed amount of money, it doesn't make any sense that the economy would collapse and this society would be destroyed, because people have to spend money if they want to survive in this day and age. That's just what it is. If I don't spend money, I'm not going to be able to eat. I'm not going to be able to shelter myself. I'm not going to be able to provide for other people. I'll die. So if I don't spend money, I die. So a fixed money economy would reprice everything as it naturally is, and it then introduces a true and real amount of discipline to monetary spending and an opportunity cost. Because if my Bitcoin that I hold is going up in value as a result of deflationary forces, as technology advances, things get cheaper, as more value has to squeeze down to create room for the new value, and that squeezing down is a lowering of price within the Bitcoin triangle of value. I like to call it a pyramid. If you imagine all 21 million units within this thing denominated everything, and everything in the world is priced in that, well, if new value comes in the form of a new technology that's created something that we value, and it's still fixed, well, there has to be room for that value to be priced in. So everything else in that pyramid has to go down in price. And that's what deflation is ultimately. And that's the natural state of technological advancement in the economy, as Jeff Booth would assert. And so if everything's going down in price and my money is fixed, my money is going up in value. And so that means I have an opportunity cost in the form of, well, if I spend my Bitcoin today, I can't spend it tomorrow where prices are perhaps lower and my money's worth more. So I have to be extremely confident and have a high degree of belief that what I'm spending up my money on today is actually valuable to me. And this creates all sorts of economic, downstream effects from this kind of incentive and introduction of true discipline. Real value, or you could call it faux value, fake value that's kind of bloated up and fluffed up and scammy and all this stuff, people aren't actually going to assign value to that because they're now actually taking into careful consideration how and where and when they're spending their money. And so if I get, kind of slight hints of scamminess and greediness and that you're trying to rip me off, I'm going to just wait till tomorrow and spend my money on something else that I know I actually value, like food and all this basic stuff. So what I'll actually spend my money on is something that I actually truly value. So perhaps instead of spending my money on a whole bunch of nonsense, I'll actually spend my money on grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And so as money funnels towards those more valuable things continue to proliferate throughout the economy because those are the types of things that get funded. And so what happens in a fixed money deflationary economy is that value is actually assigned carefully, and thus what is valuable continues to exist and proliferate across time, and what is not valuable gets rightfully shunned out of the economy and loses value and goes bankrupt. So it just introduces a real level of economic supply and demand, really is what happens in a fixed system, and it properly prices in productivity and results in a deflationary economy where somehow there's a belief that prices going down and things getting more affordable and more abundant would break the economy. That doesn't make any sense. As life gets more prosperous for me and everyone else in the economy, we don't like it. We hate it. We'd rather have an inflationary injection to stimulate the boom bust cycle that actually creates it. And all, it's wrapped in nonsense.
Yeah, well, and I saw one recently too, where basically the simplest dismantling of it that I've ever heard, which I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Was like, so prices going down, you think that means people spend less money. So when things go on sale, people don't buy them more. No, things go on sale, people buy them more. That's the entire definition of why there's a sale. Like why a business has a sale. They lower the price to get you to buy more of it. So if that were happening all the time across everything, all the prices were going down, we'd buy less of the things that were getting cheaper.
It never tracks, and it doesn't make sense. And even in the recession, depression eras and cycles of the economy, it's because we don't actually let demand fall down to its true level that it then continues to get bloated up excessively, which makes the system more and more fragile, which necessitates more and more monetary injections to be quicker on the trigger to print money to then cover those up, which leads to more and more debasement of money. And that's the system of fiat, and it just doesn't work, versus okay, what's the actual price of this thing to where people will start to buy it again? And that's the true demand level. And that's what needs to happen in a depression recession. And that's why it would actually be a good thing for Bitcoin to be the singular monetary system, because if something got bloated up, it would fall back down to that true 21 million level to where we can actually rebound, and all of the nonsense and bloat and bubble is wiped out and washed away, and it doesn't get, stimulated and injected. If there's a cancer in the economy or in your body, you wouldn't, wait for it to go down and then, it's still alive and then just blast it with more cancer cells and allow it to continue. You'd rather it wash away completely and then be eliminated entirely and reboot from there. But it's akin to the monetary injection that we get to, that must happen because the system is built on debt and it can't fully unwind, or else the system will completely collapse and they'll lose their stronghold on the monetary printer. But it's going to happen anyways, thanks to Bitcoin.
So back to the Bitcoin being truth, like you said at the beginning, right? Where there's no truth in any of these prices or any of these asset valuations or any of these, what supply and demand is when you have not only you have manipulated money supply, you have manipulated interest rates, which is the cost of money. So we don't actually have the accurate cost of borrowing money. So when we're investing it, we don't actually know
It's stupid.
It's off.
It's stupid.
It's insane.
It's so stupid.
You said Bitcoin ruthlessly exposes scammers.
Mm-hmm.
So that follows kind of with what you were saying, but what do you mean by that? Can you go explain that a little bit more deeper?
Yeah, it just tracks to, I think crypto is a great example because it's kind of in the same sphere of Bitcoin, and it often gets misassociated with Bitcoin. Bitcoin came to be in 2009, and it soon after was chugging up in price, and people saw this new technology that was a cryptographic form of money, and they said, well, I can create something that's better. But the underlying incentive there is one rooted in fiat, in that you want to make money quickly, and it's really greed, which still exists and likely still will with Bitcoin. But people wanted to make money quickly by creating a new Bitcoin because they saw how much money it made, all the people that bought into Bitcoin, not even the founder of it, but they said, hey, I'll create a new Bitcoin that's faster, more efficient, more private, whatever. It's got all the bells and whistles. You give me your money because my Bitcoin is better, and then I'll make a bunch of money. But this is a scam, because Bitcoin is the most secure, absolutely scarce monetary system that can't be corrupted, and it's decentralized through and through. And there's other properties of it as well, and it fulfills all of the requisite monetary properties that you could ask for. It is superior money. So you can't actually create a more superior form of Bitcoin because it, all the things that I mentioned prior to. So it's a scam, ultimately, to say that there's a better Bitcoin. But people will believe it because they're also trying to make money quickly. And if enough people believe that this new token is a better Bitcoin and buy into it, well, then they'll make money quickly. The founders will make money quickly. But Bitcoin exposes the scammers that created it and the scam that the project and token is, because it's ultimately inferior. And so it's essentially competing against Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin is that most secure, absolutely scarce system that's constantly presenting proof of work, not only within its protocol, but in its outperformance against the rest of the market, people are choosing Bitcoin more and more. And that's what happens over time. It doesn't happen maybe instantly. Dogecoin might go up a few percentage points more over Bitcoin across a day or a week or a year or whatever. But over time, more and more people are choosing Bitcoin for the underlying incentive structure. And thus the scam that is crypto gets exposed as a scam for what it is, as an inferior asset to Bitcoin, and then it just gets washed away. That's why in the 2017 cycle, which 2021 was pretty crazy, and I wasn't necessarily around for the 2017 cycle in terms of being in Bitcoin in the space, but I've seen videos of just all these 3-letter names that were created, and people were just blasting away at these random crypto tokens. 99.9% of them are absolutely worthless now, and you still have some scams that are around today. Like your Ethereums and XRPs of the world that are trending down in Bitcoin price. But the market is telling you what's really going on. Well, they're still advertising it as better than Bitcoin and more scalable, and our banks are using this, whatever the grift is. But the point is that Bitcoin exposes those scams and they get washed away, and they don't come back because the market learns and is learning that it's Bitcoin, not crypto.
And the next Bitcoin is Bitcoin.
Yeah. It's like you can't, it's like the number zero and its significance in math. You can't create another number zero, and if you do, then it's just the number zero. And you're already at the thing that was invented and people, desire and want and find significant.
Yeah. So this question is not intended to get you to say something inflammatory, but I do think right now we're in an interesting moment of the Bitcoin Treasury company renaissance, whatever you want to call it, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not pounding the table saying I'm against Bitcoin Treasury companies. I think Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin is for enemies. Companies are going to buy Bitcoin the same way people are going to buy Bitcoin. That's the way incentives work, right? Countries mm-hmm. are going to as well. I can't stop them. So I'm not going out of my way to be against it. But I do see, it feels like this moment where I'm maybe the first ones like MSTR or whatever, they've established more trust. I can guarantee that there will be others who will over-leverage themselves. They'll do it in a less responsible way. They'll rug people. That's guaranteed as mm-hmm. it proliferates more. And my other thing is the things I used to say about Bitcoin, not crypto, where anytime you hear somebody start to talk about the roadmap, the founding team, the community, shitcoin alarms should be going off in your brain and you should just run away and you'll be better off 99% of the time. But now Bitcoiners are talking about, well, look at the team behind this treasury company and look at the roadmap of how they're doing it. And so it's this little weird, what are your thoughts on the Bitcoin treasury companies and this moment that we're at where it's kind of the fiat creep into Bitcoin, you might call it.
Yeah, I'm not for or against it. I think it's an inevitable part of the hyper-Bitcoinization process. I think it's fascinating to see a bubble forming within Bitcoin for the first time. And, it's just based on arbitraging the ridiculous nature of fiat and its ability to just spawn infinite money out of the ether and then assign that money to Bitcoin. And that's part of the speculative attack on fiat that, again, is inevitable. And as I wrote about it, some people directed me to Pierre Rochard's article about it in 2014, how this speculative attack on fiat was just going to happen because, and rightfully so, if I can, access infinite money in the form of fiat to buy Bitcoin just by offering some, debt instrument and give people a percentage return because everyone is desperately searching for something other than the money that is fiat to store their value in. And people like, secure, guaranteed percentage rates, see treasury bills. And then I can take that money that I received from that sale and buy Bitcoin, then that's going to happen because it's just too brilliant and obvious of an opportunity to acquire Bitcoins. I think eventually you're going to have to, the stock has to be bought and held for the stock to succeed. And you're starting to see companies that are being created solely to arbitrage fiat and buy Bitcoin with it. They don't do anything else. They don't create any other value. So perhaps in the short term, similar to crypto, you might outperform Bitcoin as other people buy it. But as the shift from fiat to Bitcoin continues to happen, and particularly in the late stages, well, why am I holding this stock if the only thing you have is Bitcoin? I can't pay anything for it. You're not actually creating any value. And then once you lose the ability to spawn fiat out of thin air, you're just a company holding Bitcoin. And that's all you've done. And why would I hold anything that just has a certain amount of Bitcoin rather than holding Bitcoin? And so people are just going to sell the stock and the bubble will pop and it'll collapse. But there'll be companies that actually do start to create value within the Bitcoin world and for and around Bitcoin, and perhaps people will actually want to buy those stocks. I think this isn't something I've gotten super deep into mentally, But I think the entire market's going to change, and that includes publicly traded stocks. And most of the reason why people buy stocks today is actually as a replacement for savings, and replacing fiat and money as savings. And so if I hold a stock in the Bitcoin world, it's got to be worth more than me just holding Bitcoin. So how are you as a company doing that? How are you providing me as a shareholder more value than holding Bitcoin? And it's accretive, and there's other things to work through there, but I think it's a fascinating thing that's happening. I ultimately think it accelerates the transition from fiat to Bitcoin as more and more of the market, especially institutionally, is waking up. Wait, we're just like taking this money to buy this thing over here. Well, clearly this thing over here that's Bitcoin is way more valuable. And so more and more people are just waking up to the belief that they should dump all their fiat and put it into Bitcoin. And that's what's being accelerated right now with this speculative attack. So it's also a reflection of Bitcoin's truth in that everything is good for Bitcoin, which is the opposite of everything that's good. Everything is bad for fiat. And you're kind of seeing that now with some of the political events. It doesn't matter which way they go, whether it's militarily or monetarily, whatever decision they make seems to worsen that system. There's kind of no escape. Bitcoin is somehow, some way, everything is good for it, and everything propagates its success and its inevitability more, and its prosperity and its realization, its funneled realization towards its brilliance. And I think the speculative attack is, again, part of that. Is people wake up, the fiat thing is so stupid. Like, we're just creating fiat out of thin air and using it to buy Bitcoin. Clearly, Bitcoin's most valuable.
It's kind of mind blowing when you look at it that simply, and then companies and governments aren't really, or I mean, I guess governments aren't really afraid of it and looking at it as the speculative attack that it is, where it's like, hey, we're taking this worthless thing that you print out of nothing and using it to buy hard money. You're just gonna let us, like, we can just do this? Like,
right.
You don't care
I'm
that
gonna
I can
keep
just do
doing
this
it
by the billion? Yeah, it's bizarre. It's a bizarre, loophole in the weird system that we have. But I think the way you talked about the Bitcoin Treasury companies is a good sort of lens to look at it through, where you're either betting on a short term, it's going to go up in the short term and I'm going to get rid of it, or you're betting this company will continue to be able to do an accretive strategy where they can acquire more Bitcoin at a faster rate than I myself can acquire it with my fiat. But am I betting they can do that forever? And if I don't think they can do that forever, what else is that company bringing to the table? Where I think MicroStrategy has done a really good job of trying to answer that what else question, right? Like, opening up other capital markets that don't have access to buy Bitcoin to access it through their different instruments, or in the future, maybe they're like some kind of Bitcoin bank and they come up with other financial products. Whereas if you're just looking at these other new companies, is it like, okay, if they run out of their ability to be accretive in their Bitcoin strategy by borrowing fiat, if something makes that strategy break, am I stuck holding this thing that's gonna, like you said, just pop and go worthless because they had one thing that they could do, and what happens if they can no longer do it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think MicroStrategy has a massively asymmetric position as a holder of 500,000 plus Bitcoins. And so if there is a company that's going to actually create and continue to create value in the Bitcoin world, it's most likely them. But I think it's dangerous to play high time preference games. And this is what is going on right now. Is I want to buy this stock or this offering to make as much money as quickly as possible. I want to outperform Bitcoin, perform better than Bitcoin versus just holding Bitcoin, which is the ultimate low time preference game. And it's creeping into fiat. It's that fiat creep, and it's born out of greed to acquire as many Bitcoins as possible rather than creating as much value as possible, which is something that's more sustainable and is more rooted in a low time preference. It's largely speculative even with MicroStrategy that they'll continue to create value in the Bitcoin world, and thus it'll continue to be worth holding. And then you have these other newer nascent companies that are literally just being created to offer these debt instruments and buy Bitcoin. That's massively speculatory, and I don't think it lasts in the long run. And, things can change for each company, but I see it as more high time preference than not, and I'm wary of dipping my toes into that water because I can just hold Bitcoin and align myself with that truth and prosperity.
I was gonna make a joke about, I don't know, man. If you and I last long enough in this game, we might get hired to run a Bitcoin Treasury company.
There you go, and it's interesting to see that happening. It's like Bitcoiners are getting
Yeah.
poached off and assigned to these companies, and they're brilliant minds, and all due respect to them because they're helping Bitcoin propagate itself. But I'm more hesitant than not to align myself with that line of thinking than to just chill out and chill on Bitcoin's beach.
Well, one of the things when we were talking about earlier, the AI, or excuse me, the infinite productivity and like the amount of wealth and value in the world that can be infinite. One of the things that I'm fascinated by, I'd be curious to know, like, if you've sort of thought about this rabbit hole at all, is like the advent of AI and robotics. This is a Jeff Booth thing, basically, right? Like, if you've read the Price of Tomorrow, but basically, as AI and robotics like create value and increase productivity gains, what that means is prices falling. And the other thing I think it means is people losing jobs. Like, productivity gains is essentially oftentimes the other side of the coin of lost jobs, because if companies can create more stuff, create more output from less input, which usually means less labor, they will do it, and they will use AI and robotics to do it. That should drive prices down. We should make all of us better off, but we have this inflating fiat money that has to inflate at 2% per year, which doesn't just mean it going from 0 to 2%. It means erasing all the deflationary effects of those productivity gains and then inflating the supply money. So my thing is like, how do you protect yourself against AI? Maybe become a plumber, or maybe try to learn AI, or buy Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Because now you hold 1/21 millionth of all future productivity gains of the humans and the robots.
Exactly. Yeah, you align yourself with that deflationary force that is AI and even greater technology, and what it means in the deflationary force. Because if I live in an inflationary system where if I lose my job and life's getting more expensive, that's really bad because I lose my income. But if I lose my job and life gets more affordable, it gets less expensive because of the productivity gains from the deflationary system, which happens to me as long as I align myself with Bitcoin and buy and hold on to it. I immediately get the productivity gains that funnel into it. Life gets more affordable over time. The losing of the job is offset by the productivity gain. And so I think most people are concerned about AI and the loss of jobs that stem from it because they're viewing it through the inflationary lens, and that we don't actually receive the productivity gains when we're pricing the economy in fiat, in the US dollar, etc. We receive the productivity gains, the dropping of the marginal cost of production, the lowering of prices, the increase of purchasing power that comes with the deflationary system that is Bitcoin. I liken Bitcoin to having the best second job in the world because I don't have to work at all, but I still receive the income that comes from the purchasing power accreting to Bitcoin as a result of productivity gains and all of the monetary liquidity in the world funneling towards Bitcoin. And so and being that Bitcoin is the most superior monetary asset, it's akin to having the most superior second job in the world because I don't have to work and I'm receiving the most amount of purchasing power possible as a result of holding it. So I don't think AI is an actual concern in the Bitcoin world. It is absolutely a concern in the fiat world that gets more and more expensive. But that's why we can't have these forces opposing each other, which is the inflationary force of fiat versus the deflationary force of technology. We need an alignment between those two things, which is where Bitcoin comes in. And that's how you, me, and we prosper maximally to infinity and beyond.
Yeah. And I think there's sort of an idea that AI could bring like sort of abundance to humanity, right? Like, I think that there is a world in which like that's the trajectory of our evolution of humanity. Like, shouldn't life get easier for us? Shouldn't Shouldn't, we have to work less and less as humanity becomes more productive, as we put robots and AI in a place to do some of the labor we would have had to do. So there's sort of like could AI lead to an abundance and a utopia? And my biggest thing with that is like, maybe in theory, but only if the money's fixed, like only if
Right.
we use Bitcoin, because what will happen is the fiat incentives are people lose their job, people beg the government for more safety nets, more bailouts, like government prints more money. Maybe there's like universal basic income. It's like, where's that money come from? It's like,
Yeah.
here's some free money, but it devalues the purchasing power of the money I'm giving you. Like, it doesn't work. But
Yeah.
Bitcoin, you drive towards this utopia. And I know you're interested in like Bitcoin gives us hope, raises global consciousness. Like, these things to me are only possible in that utopia where the money is fixed.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so critical to understand money and to understand Bitcoin, because all of these developments that are popping up, and you can even the military conflicts that are happening now, once you see it through the money, it becomes so obvious why it's happening, the underlying incentives behind it, how it can actually be resolved totally by not dropping a bomb or doing whatever in terms of violence, but actually shifting the roots of the system to Bitcoin such that the military might and conflicts can't be funded. And so you look at the world through a fiat lens, and it seems like it's just broken and breaking because it is broken and breaking. And once you align it with Bitcoin, you start to see, okay, there's actually is hope, because my life does get better over time because Bitcoin accretes in purchasing power. That effectively buys me back more time, and all of the things that come with that, and the accreting and increasing in purchasing power. That's the world that I want to align myself with. And once we start to do that globally, and we're starting to see that, then we all align in that same camp, and that's the world I'm here for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't always be talking about the weird juxtaposition between like people who understand Bitcoin and people who think it's a scam. But I'm so struck by that often, how like, you could be like, yo, don't you value your time and energy and want to take that time and energy, which are your two most finite things that you have in this world, and then store them in something that's also finite and bounded by time and energy? And people are like, I roll, you're an idiot. And I'm like,
Right.
what? What are you talking about? Like, this is our only hope for humanity. And they're like, you're a scammer. I'm like, I
You
don't
can
know,
also
man.
ask them questions like,
Yeah.
why are things getting more expensive over time?
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, well, they don't know. And well, you can realize, well, they're actually printing more money. Well, first have them deduce that it doesn't make any sense for prices to get more expensive over time as technology is advancing. That's backwards entirely. So that just, that doesn't really equate. But then you get them into, why is this actually happening? Why is my McDonald's Big Mac more expensive year over year? It doesn't make any sense. Then you can get down further into it, and it just all comes back to understanding money, because if they understood money, they would understand the time and energy part, how their time and energy is being diluted in fiat and how it's being preserved in Bitcoin. And actually, it's actually increasing in Bitcoin terms. So it just starts with understanding money.
Do you have that experience? Like, have you orange pilled people in your real life, or have you orange pilled people online, or like, how's that gone? Do you have that experience at all?
Yeah, I've seen a few comments online, and then I have family members that have bought Bitcoin for sure, and we've talked about. I've had friends that I've jumped on calls with, and I've given speeches on it at Toastmasters groups that I've been a part of, and people that you can't impose the understanding of Bitcoin upon somebody. They have to have a natural curiosity and drive towards understanding it for them to actually understand it. It's like what Einstein says, knowledge obtained under compulsion bears no hold on the mind, which is why government schools stink, and because it's entirely compulsory, and it's not something that we're naturally curious about. At least that's my experience. I'm kind of projecting from that, but I feel like that's the experience with most people, where they have things that they're naturally drawn to and naturally curious about, and you can take it with the fiat schools route. They don't really get the chance to pursue them in that system. But outside of that, what are they naturally drawn to? What are you naturally curious about? And once they have an actual curiosity about Bitcoin, then that's when they'll start to connect the dots for themselves, rather than just hearing it and it's kind of in one year, out the other, because they're not actually interested and curious about it.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions. Well, one is, I like to try to make the questions flow from one for the other, but this doesn't flow at all from what you just said. But you've written a thing that I also think is fascinating about how we don't actually live in a capitalist society. This is another thing that I think, like, going along with the, like, people don't understand money. Like, people don't understand, like, we don't, I am of this theory, and I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it to make a video about this, that pretty much what everybody, you see online, a lot of people are mad at capitalism these days, right? They blame a lot of things on capitalism. I think that what they blame on capitalism, what they think is wrong with capitalism, they actually hate about the fiat money system.
Yes.
They actually hate the money printer. They just don't know it.
Yes.
And they think it's just capitalism and greed. But what they actually hate is the money printer. And you wrote a thing that was like, we don't actually even live in a capitalist society. So
Yeah.
it's like a misnomer there anyways. Can you articulate that piece a little bit? Or
Yeah, for sure. I think you're spot on in that they're not mad at capitalism. They're mad at fiat, which has nothing to do with capitalism, because the foundational piece, the foundational tool to any economy is the money. And the money today is not capitalist in any way, shape, or form. And if you look at the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx, the fifth point of how to turn a state and a nation communist is to centralize the issuance and creation of money, credit, in the hands of a central authority, and only them. And so then you look to fiat, and the issuance and authority over money and credit only stems from a centralized authority, which is the Federal Reserve, which is enforced by the federal government. So how can something that's completely aligned with the Communist Manifesto, that's fundamental to the economy, be called capitalist and a capitalist economy? So we don't have capitalist money at our foundation. How could we have a capitalist economy? So when you actually have money that's chosen by the market and supply and demand, which is actually what capitalism is, then you start to build on the foundation roots of capitalism, and that's when you actually start to see the prosperity and benefits that come from capitalism and the incentive structure that creates, versus the centralized system that is fiat today, which again has nothing to do with capitalism and much more to do with communism and socialism.
I think that's fascinating how so many of these things come back down to, like, just a misunderstanding of the fundamental of what the thing is, what money is, what capitalism is, what free markets are, what fiat is, what government, is, and what its role is.
It all comes back to that question, what is money? And that's why Breedlove says it'll be the defining question of our time in history. And I think it absolutely is, because once you get into that question from a curious standpoint, and once you actually understand it and can articulate it and explain it, you start to see things through that lens, and you start to realize people blaming late stage capitalism is just a load of crock. It's just absolutely bogus, and it has nothing to do with reality, because the money completely opposes that view.
Yeah, I think, like, some of these people are 99% to being a Bitcoiner. Like, I actually made a video. This guy Gary's Economics? I made a video.
Yeah.
He's going on TV all the time in the UK and talking about all the problems that we have. And then he's like literally saying what all the Bitcoiners say, wealth inequality, all these things. And then the only thing he doesn't get is the Bitcoin piece. And I made a video. I was like, this guy's 99% of the way there. Like, just kick him over the finish line. Same thing with, like, the people who hate late stage capitalism. I'm like, you're almost there. Like, just come over to the understanding the money piece and then the Bitcoin piece. And, like, we're basically entirely aligned.
Yeah, that's what it takes, is just once you see the money and you see how fiat just doesn't even fill the requisite properties of money, mainly as being a store of value, but all of the other stuff that comes with that, you're like, well, why are we using this thing? And then, okay, what's better? And then you can see the abuses of how that system was formed, how that system has continued to be coerced into existence, and all of the malincentives that stem from that, which creates the world that we live in, because the world, for better or for worse, runs on the monetary system. And that's what's upstream of everything else.
So you're writing a book, right? The Bitcoin Thesis?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about it? What's going to be about? What was the impetus for it? And then, like, when do you know when it's going to come out?
Yeah, the impetus for it was back in 2023. I was starting to get into Bitcoin more, but I was at a point where it was up in my mind and I could, piece it together up there, but I couldn't necessarily articulate it or express it super well. And I also wanted to, because I was thinking about starting an investment fund at the time, I was also thinking about writing a thesis about Bitcoin because Bitcoin was foundational to the investment fund. And as a young chap, with not a ton of experience in running an investment fund, that would be some proof of work to point to, giving me some expertise on the subject. So all of those things together, and it actually started when I was talking to a friend in the car, and I was trying to communicate to him about Bitcoin, and I threw out the idea aloud that I was thinking about writing a Bitcoin thesis, and having the difficulty, but also having the idea of writing the thesis, it like clicked together that this could be the route for me to be able to understand it greater and for me to be able to express and articulate it to everybody else that's interested and curious. So the book is about what the title is, the Bitcoin Thesis. It's kind of the A to Z understanding. It starts with the first chapter is kind of slaps you in the face with the new paradigm and the juxtaposition of it, in that the title of the chapter is Everything Trends Towards Zero Against Bitcoin. And it shows you how things are increasing in fiat terms, but everything is going down in Bitcoin terms. And it's like, what's going on here? Like, how is this so? Why is this happening? What's the significance of it? What is Bitcoin? But then again, as I said at the earlier in the podcast, is that the chapter ends with, if you want to understand Bitcoin, you got to understand money. So then it gets into the fundamentals of money, monetary comparisons, things of that nature, to where you gain that understanding, and then you can plug it into the inflationary system, start to compare and contrast that against the deflationary system and reality of technology in the world that is the natural state. Goes further into the stupidity and ridiculousness and insanity of fiat. One of my favorite chapters in the book is titled "The Greatest Ponzi Scheme of All Time," because that's what fiat, and specifically the US dollar, is. And once you see that, you're like, this is ridiculous. But it gets into fiat, and then the bridging chapter between fiat and the fundamentals of money, and more the basics on this side, and what Bitcoin is, the significance of it, why it matters, is why Bitcoin matters. And in that chapter, I get into the disgustingly savage nature of the IMF and World Bank, and how the fiat system has infiltrated its way around the world, particularly in the global south, enslaving them with debt, and how we're actually not too far removed from the reality of the agri-beats back in the 15th century, which I get into earlier in the book, which is highly extractive, impoverishing these people in third world countries in order for the rich first world countries to benefit. And the thing that I write is that the developing countries are actually developing the developed countries as this system, continues to extract from them. It's quite sickening. It's really concerning. But that is the bridge, and then you get into, okay, well, how does Bitcoin work foundationally? What is it like as money? And it gets into, it is superior money, Bitcoin not crypto. Steel manning Bitcoin is a chapter going through the arguments and rebutting them. And then the last kind of fourth of there's 21 chapters. You can draw the line there for why that is. But the last fourth of it is more the esoteric significance of it. The evolution of governance is one, because that's a topic that's really not talked about a lot within Bitcoin. But that's going to be a radical transformation, as is everything else. But then it gets into the world built on Bitcoin and what that looks like, and the prosperity and abundance that's coming, and the beauty of Bitcoin, that is the incentive structure. And it's a whole bunch of things. I could talk about it for a while, but it's been a ton of fun to write. And I've learned, I think the best way to learn is to teach. And it's been a way for me to teach myself in the written form. And, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent on it, but it's been a ton of fun. I don't have an exact release date. I'm I've written like 400 pages now, and I'm probably about 80. I just finished today the 16th chapter, so on to the 17th, and the first draft will be done, and I'll go through the second draft and send it to a publisher, which I already have. I don't have an exact date, but it'll be out there when it's out there.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, it sounds dope. Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed consuming and reading a lot of your other stuff, so I'm excited to check it out when it comes out. I'll definitely read it. Maybe maybe you can come back on, and when all the other big time Bitcoin podcasts are asking you to come on, you remember me that I was
100%, no doubt.
I was in there early. All right, cool, man. Well, yeah, I'm excited about that. I mean, if people want to, follow you, learn more, also, like I said at the beginning, I think it's at Cole_Walmsley. The Beyond Infinity newsletter, which is beyond8infinity.com. You can find that.
That's right.
The Cole Walmsley Experience is your podcast and YouTube show. And then the other thing that I like to ask all my guests at the end is, like, aside from, your resources and content that you create that are great, is there a recommendation you have for other people of, like, a creator or a piece of content in the Bitcoin space that, like, you recommend to other people?
In the Bitcoin space. Interesting. I would actually take it a different direction.
Sure.
I think that Bitcoin's an ultimate rabbit hole. It's infinitely deep, but I think the truer, deeper, more significant rabbit hole lies within you. And I would start that rabbit hole with something called Atma Vichara, which is inquiry into the self. I had a wild experience on a plane ride in my last 30 minutes, like a week and a half ago, going on a ChatGPT, and I basically asked it to give me all of the meditation practices it could come up with, and it gave me 39 different ones, and I came across this one that was number 25, Atma Vichara, and it was self-inquiry, and I started to dive into this rabbit hole, and it was as if the mind was going one way, like externally this way. As I dove into this rabbit hole, it started to spin the tires the other way, and it was like, what's going on? It was like tripping ball sack with this with this whole rabbit hole. And that's what I'd recommend, because Bitcoin is a realization, but that's the ultimate realization, in that Atma Vichara inquiry into the self revolves around the question, who am I? And I think to self-realize, you've got to realize the self, and that's what that whole rabbit hole is about. And Ramana Maharshi is the specific quote-unquote guru who kind of brought that into consciousness in a more significant way in the early 1900s. And he's got a bunch of great stuff around it. That's a rabbit hole I would recommend exploring.
Sick. No, I love that. That's great. I love it when people pull out of different recommendations that aren't the standard stuff. Is it Atma, ATMA?
Yep.
Vichara, is that it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Vichara. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know I'm wrapping up, but it made me think of, because I was looking through your Twitter feed. I've had, like, my dip in the toe, periods of time with, like, the idea of, like, manifestation, right? Like, that you can manifest things. And then there was this woman that you had on your Twitter, and she does this video where she's like, she's a manifestation coach or whatever, and there's like a dog barking in the background, and she's like, I'm gonna teach you how to manifest something, like, live in real time. And she, like, talks through how she's visualizing the dog being silent, and, like, as she's talking, the dog, like, slowly stops barking.
Yeah.
I was like, this is awesome.
So cool. Yeah. And then I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'll test that out sometimes, and it's cool to just play with it and experiment around with it. That video certainly caught my eye, because I've had experiences in the past with barking dogs and stuff. And yeah, it's cool to be able to tap into the quantum field and manifest things through that way. That's another rabbit hole for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. And then I do the whole, like, do I believe that it's real? Like, she could have faked that. She could have filmed it 20 times until the dog stopped barking. You're like, you never know. But I'm like, maybe it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just all about me exploring my own.
It's all about
idea
belief
of
and trust and faith. Yeah, that's what it revolves around.
Oh man, another rabbit hole, almost as deep as Bitcoin. Cool, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. This is super fun. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, well, super fun. Thanks again for having me on, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah.